Ho, 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 ho! What a treat for St. Louis Park this year. The President and the Space Lady Holiday Musical for 8 performances at the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge in St. Louis Park, December 13th through the 22nd. Tickets available, or if you're very nice, in your Christmas stocking. Come and enjoy this holiday treat filled with madcap slapstick comedy and a real laugher. And don't be naughty, you will be nice. See the President and the Space Lady at the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge in St. Louis Park, December 13th through the 22nd, 2019. We'll see you there. It's the President and the Space Lady Holiday Musical being performed at the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge right there in St. Louis Park, 6509 Walker Street, right next to the American Legion. Come and have a good old time. It's slapstick, it's funny, it's frolicky, and if you're very nice, you can get tickets, or if you're very nice, right there in your Christmas stocking. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Yes, St. Louis Park's in for a real treat this holiday season. The President and the Space Lady Holiday Musical by Phil Hall, St. Louis Park resident and playwright. Performed 8 times in December 13th through the 22nd at the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge, 6509 Walker Street, right there in St. Louis Park. And be nice, and you'll find the tickets in your Christmas stocking. President, Space Lady, and come have a wonderful time.
Park Theater, St. Louis Park's community theater. We are the producers of the show that you're currently watching, Arts in the Park Video Magazine, which is broadcast on Park Cable TV Channel 15 and also on our YouTube channel, Arts in the Park, one word, Video Magazine. In the summer, Phil Hall, a St. Louis Park playwright, approached the Park Theater Company about producing his original play, The President and the Space Lady. Phil had originally written the play in 2011, but due to unforeseen circumstances was unable to launch it at that time. This play is a zany romp which takes place on Christmas Eve in the Oval Office. It's written in the burlesque style of a TV sitcom, filled with slapstick humor, double entendre, and fast-paced comedic dialogue. A perfect holiday treat for a theater audience at Christmas time, with the message of peace on earth, goodwill to men, and women too. Justin David Cervantes was invited to be the director of this production. Justin had recently directed Happy Days, the musical, at the Lakeshore Players Theater in White Bear Lake. He brought experience, enthusiasm, and a passion for comedy, having a keen ear for the timing that is involved in a comedy such as The President and the Space Lady. A good time was had by all. The Park Theater Company over the past 10 years has entertained over 3,500 enthusiastic theater patrons. Thank you so much for watching and let us know how much you enjoy the show.
Ho, 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 ho! What a treat for St. Louis Park this year. The President and the Space Lady Holiday Musical. For 8 performances at the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge in St. Louis Park, December 13th through the 22nd. Tickets available, or if you're very nice, in your Christmas stocking. Come and enjoy this holiday treat filled with madcap, slapstick comedy and a real laugher. And don't be naughty, you will be nice. See the President and the Space Lady at the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge in St. Louis Park, December 13th through the 22nd, 2019. We'll see you there. It's the President and the Space Lady Holiday Musical, being performed at the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge right there in St. Louis Park, 6509 Walker Street, right next to the American Legion. Come and have a good old time. It's slapstick, it's funny, it's frolicky, and if you're very nice, you can get tickets, or if you're very nice, right there in your Christmas stocking. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Yes, St. Louis Park's in for a real treat this holiday season. The President and the Space Lady Holiday Musical by Phil Hall, St. Louis Park resident and playwright. Performed 8 times in December 13th through the 22nd. At the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge, 6509 Walker Street, right there in St. Louis Park. And be nice, oh, and you'll find the tickets in your Christmas stocking. President, Space Lady, and come have a wonderful time.
name is Phil Hall, and I'm a homeowner here in St. Louis Park to talk and tell you a little bit about some of the history I've had in theater, both here in St. Louis Park and professionally in other parts of the country. I first became interested in theater when I was a little boy, when my grandmother, whose name is Elizabeth Kerr, and for those of you that don't recognize the name Elizabeth Kerr, she co-starred on Mork and Mindy with Robin Williams and Pam Dauber. She played Mindy's grandmother for the run of the show, although she didn't stay with the show the entire period. Anyway, she came to Los Angeles when I was a little boy. I was 10 years old and appeared in a musical called Redhead. It was a Bob Fosse musical, and it starred his wife, Gwen Verdon, who at the time had become famous for Damn Yankee. And they came out to California, and my parents made me go see the show, which I did, and I was just mesmerized by everything that happened, and the fact that my grandmother was all a part of it was just the most wonderful thing in the world to me. That night I got to sit backstage with my grandmother and watch a show from the wings, and the next day she took me back home and delivered me to my parents, and by the end of that afternoon she'd called an acting teacher, and I started acting the very next week. At 10 years old, I was being instructed by this old English vaudevillian who was doing a melodrama in Van Nuys. It was an old musical called The Drunkard, and The Drunkard at the time was a big temperance play. It ran for years and years and years in downtown Los Angeles, and this old vaudevillian had put together sort of a musical version of the show, and he did it on Van Nuys Boulevard, just down the street from the Big Boy restaurant on Van Nuys Boulevard that has been seen in so many movies at the time, such as American Graffiti. And every week I went to my acting lesson, and I had to take a check. I remember it cost my parents $15 for me to go and get instructed by this guy. And I started acting, and I've been acting ever since. At one point, I got hired as an apprentice at a theater called Valley Music Theater. It was a professional theater. It was run by Art Linkletter and Nick Mayo and Randolph Hale, were the three big producers. I first arrived in the Twin Cities back in 1972 when I was on the road with a children's theater called the Robin Hood Players. They were a professional children's theater company out of Chicago. And I'd been going to Northwestern as a theater major, where among other people in my class was Shelley Long and an actor by the name of Peter Strauss, who went on to do many other things. And anyway, one day there I saw in the lounge an offer to go on the road with a children's theater, and it paid, and it toured the country, and for better or worse, I dropped out of Northwestern and went on the road with this children's theater. And among the places that we happened to come to was Minneapolis. I got involved in theater back then. I started working at Dudley Riggs. He was starting a new company called the Experimental Theater Company. And back in the 70s, Dudley started this new theater group, and we did different types of plays. It was more experimental theater than it was improv. But among the shows we did was one called Point of Order, which was an actual recreation of the McCarthy hearings, which had taken place back in the 50s. It was basically a witch hunt looking for people who had communist leanings or who had indications that they were sympathetic to communists. And it didn't take much to get you in trouble. A little whisper by somebody or somebody that didn't want you to have a job, they could ruin your reputation just by saying something to the government that so-and-so was accused of being a communist. And among the people that I played was an actor by the name of Jack Gilford, who at the time was kind of a milquetoast sort of guy, and me being as small as I am, I got the part. And when I read his testimony and realized what this guy had done in the face of these awful, awful hearings that could ruin your reputation like that or put you on a blacklist so that you could never work again, he really stood up to them. And when they accused him of being a communist, he accused him of being on a witch hunt, and it really impacted me for the rest of my life. Anyway, we left Minnesota. I did back then, back in the 70s, and went out to California and tried to get into show business, through my grandmother's access on Mork and Mindy, and met my wife, Roberta Ann Schwarz. We've been married 28 years now. Got married in Edinburgh, Scotland, of all things. Anyway, at one point, we looked around Los Angeles, didn't want to live there anymore. I'd gotten into flying, and we actually owned an airplane, so my wife and I put our stuff together, got into the airplane, flew back to Minneapolis, and a couple years later we were fortunate enough to buy this house here in St. Louis Park and happened to see an audition for a play. It was at Theater and Around, and I went back there, and after 25 years I got back into acting, and I am so glad I did, because it's led me into so many interesting things in my life. It brought me to where I am today, really. I've been writing plays all along, and I've done a number of plays up here and played some really, really fun parts. I even got to be an announcer for the Timberwolves for a while, a guy by the name of Don Overbeck, who was a fictional announcer, and like so many things, he came and went. But playwriting-wise, and this is really what I want to talk about, is the St. Louis Park Community Theater. It's a small little theater here based in St. Louis Park. Jim McDonough is the chairman of the board of the place. And one day it occurred to me that I had some plays and I needed a place to put them on. And I talked to Jim about it, and we ended up doing a play that I wrote originally called The President and the Space Lady that was an awful lot of fun. So one of the things that I hope everybody gets about this, support your local community theater. Come and see these things. They're fun, they're interesting, and essentially they're inexpensive. Plus, in a lot of these cases, the parking is free. We got good actors here in St. Louis Park. I like to think I'm one of them, and come and see these shows. Support the St. Louis Park Community Theater. The Park Theater Company is what it's known as, www.parktheatercompany.com. Among other commercials I did, I was in a commercial for the Minnesota State Lottery, and the premise was that a football bus full of fans was on its way to the game. And I was driving the bus, and the bus had broken down.
There'll be no football today.
And it looked like we weren't going to make it for the big game.
Of course it's Phil's fault.
And lo and behold, I'm scratching a lottery ticket.
Did he put gas?
And I turn into John Randall, the local football legend, and John Randall pulls the bus to the game.
We're going to the game! Yeah!
And everybody's happy. So that was just one of the parts that I've done in commercials. I played a football coach in another commercial for Treasure Island.
This is it! The big game! These guys are huge and mean! They're behemoths! We've got to match their intensity and aggression! So let's get after them! Let's get mean! Let's hear your growl! Ah!
Hey, Coach.
But among other things, I did a movie called Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, which was shown here at the St. Louis Park Film Festival. It was directed by the Zellner brothers and shot partially in Japan and partially here in Minnesota. And that was kind of an interesting day because I shot it, I think, the last day of January, my scene. I play a deaf and dumb cab driver who's the last one to see the character alive. And the temperature was every bit as cold as it looked in the movie. And it was a whole day sitting outside, so it was interesting. When they say sometimes that movie making is a lot of fun, well, you do have to be out in the conditions, and it was an experience, I can tell you that. Well, Kumiko was based on the movie Fargo. The theory was that there was a Japanese tourist who was found dead in the snow, here in Minnesota, and the legend was that she had been searching for the money that the Steve Buscemi character in Fargo had buried there by the road, and she had died trying to find this. And the movie is a fictional recounting, the movie Kumiko is a fictional recounting of this girl's journey from an office girl in Japan to essentially somebody who's hunting for a treasure. She calls herself a treasure hunter in the movie, and that's what the movie is really about.
Ho, 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 ho! What a treat for St. Louis Park this year. The President and the Space Lady Holiday Musical. For 8 performances at the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge in St. Louis Park, December 13th through the 22nd. Tickets available, or if you're very nice, in your Christmas stocking. Come and enjoy this holiday treat filled with madcap, slapstick comedy and a real laugher. And don't be naughty, you will be nice. See the President and the Space Lady at the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge in St. Louis Park, December 13th through the 22nd, 2019. We'll see you there. It's the President and the Space Lady Holiday Musical, being performed at the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge right there in St. Louis Park, 6509 Walker Street, right next to the American Legion. Come and have a good old time. It's slapstick, it's funny, it's frolicky, and if you're very nice, you can get tickets, or if you're very nice, right there in your Christmas stocking. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Yes, St. Louis Park's in for a real treat this holiday season. The President and the Space Lady Holiday Musical by Phil Hall, St. Louis Park resident and playwright. Performed 8 times in December 13th through the 22nd. At the Paul Revere Masonic Lodge, 6509 Walker Street, right there in St. Louis Park. And be nice, oh, and you'll find the tickets in your Christmas stocking. President, Space Lady, and come have a wonderful time.